Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Center for Marketing Excellence Marketing Series. My name is Patricia, and I'm the Lecturer of Marketing at SMU. I'm very pleased today to be here with you all and the chance to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Martyn. Martyn is actually the head of research at Twitter. In a career spanning over almost 20 years in the industry, Martyn held key positions in a number of organizations such as News Corporations, Fox International, and of course now he's in Twitter. In Twitter, Martyn leads the research team in the Asia Pacific, Middle East, and also North Africa markets. His work includes exploring and providing insightful information regarding all aspects of Twitter, from the audience to the global event to marketers. We use the information to make timely decisions. And Twitter all these years have been focusing a lot on social media research and the key role in understanding more about how users use Twitter. They use a broad range of techniques in research, including quantitative data such as statistical modeling, and also in qualitative aspects such as ethnographic research. And of course, they are very much involved in using technology in collecting data. This information has been given to marketers to make timely decisions. And today, we are very honored to have Martyn here to share with us, and he is going to talk on a topic about the following, that is, Twitter research mindset matters. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we welcome Martyn.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Like I say, really interesting. I've spoken to numerous clients in numerous markets, sometimes with dual language tracked, sometimes using my very basic Arabic skills that I've learned. But it's the first time I think I've ever done anything at a university, so bear with me. I hope today will be of interest. Quick show of hands. You can use the hand if you're not on your mobile phone. Quick show of hands, who's on Twitter? So you're over-indexing massively the Singapore population, so I'll answer some questions about that later. So where do we start? So we start with the concept that you really have to kind of move on from the fact that people are no longer sort of adopting digital technology. One I think is really interesting as well is that there's still, even in sort of markets like what we see within this region, like the India, the Philippines, etc., people are starting to become, almost the entire population is starting to become connected to the rest of the world via the internet. I don't think we actually sometimes take a bit of a step back and think about what does it actually truly mean to be connected. It means that every single country on this map can actually have a conversation with somebody from another country. So we could almost, in a way, somebody from Japan, who might still be very sort of PC-based, can really reach out to anybody else on the earth. Again, I think sometimes we don't take enough of a step back. However, whenever we do any research, the one thing that sort of comes up is the phrase online. So the meaning to be online. I think what's really interesting is we've all done this. We've all gone to a restaurant, to a hotel. It's almost a little bit of a fear that we're not online. We've all asked for a Wi-Fi code. We've all wanted to try and hack somebody else's Wi-Fi code. We're trying to figure out something maybe to connect somewhere else, so we get frustrated. So yeah, one of the obvious things is we've become a little bit more accident prone. But we now see that the average daily time spent online is clocking up to 5 hours. Unbelievable. You think of all those micro moments, you add all those micro moments together, and we're now getting to about 5 hours. We also know, a little bit of an assumption, but social media is actually representing about 80% of this time. We actually have a similar presentation to this that we do in the UK, and it's actually, there's a bit of insight for you, it's illegal to take a photo at a train station within the UK. but we actually set someone the task to try and find someone who was waiting for a train who wasn't looking at their phone. In 7 days, they found one person who was literally, and there's this guy staring into space. And we kind of felt that he was probably wondering where his phone was. But when it comes to this moment, social media is sort of an optimum go-to opportunity that people use. So we think it's about 80% of total consumption is using a social media platform. And we also know that there's no real such thing as a unique audience. I think Facebook still owns some of this territory. In China, there's a few apps. But we also know that people are using multiple platforms on any given day. So if we actually take some insight from media that's gone on in the past, from television, from newspapers, we actually start to give ourselves a few questions. So we almost, in a way, we thought, well, if people are using different platforms, then potentially they have a different purpose. So we've been running this research project across a range of different markets, and we really wanted to find out why people are using each platform, but in essence, like, what need state does it address? We actually have an internal rhetoric called jobs to be done. I was explaining this to some of the early folk just about a half hour or so ago. The jobs to be done framework is basically about what is it people are hiring you to do. So we want to work out, what are the people hiring Twitter to do? What need state is it going to address? And then once we understand that, how can we then look into this, and how can we provide some insight that can help our commercial partners, our advertisers, to utilise this audience to the best of their value? So the overall project is called the Discovery Mindset. We have done this project within the UK, we've taken it to Australia, but actually we've really sort of found a home within Southeast Asia because we've sort of been able to do a lot of experimentation. One thing I would say, and one of the best things about working in Asia Pacific, is actually there's a lot of people out there, there's a lot of research agencies, even like here within Singapore, there's a very good sort of startup culture. We meet a lot of people all the time that are really sort of testing some new ways to research. So we've been able to run this project within Indonesia, India, and actually the most challenging one, which was just recently, was Saudi Arabia. I'll come on to a little bit, some Saudi Arabian challenges. So what we were basically saying was, we did a lot of work, we went out there, we spoke to a lot of people, and one thing that was consistent was that people really told us that when they're on Twitter, they're in this sort of discovery mindset. We also work with a lot of sort of research theory, and a lot of that basically says to us that why is this so important? And the reason why this is so important was because we want to understand how engaged people are and then how this can actually create memories. And the reason why it's so keen to create memories is because if people are out there and they're consuming so much of this every day, how do we get them to remember the key things that they need to, the key things that we want them to retain? So where do you start? You probably expect us to come in here and talk to you about reams of Twitter data that we have internally, and of course we access all that type of data. But actually, any project along these types of lines, you have to start off by going and meeting and speaking to people. And this is where you actually really, there's not one size fits all. And actually by meeting people, by speaking to people, sometimes through translations, sometimes through their native language, you actually get to understand a hell of a lot more than you do if you just sort of try to look at some data and look at some findings. This is what I was talking about in terms of experimentation. As human beings, we do two things. We're very easy to forget things, and sometimes we project an image of ourselves that sometimes is a little bit favourable than what we actually are. However, and you can get away with this in India for anyone who wants to know, but you can't get away with this in many other markets. In India, to find this out, we wanted to understand how people were using social media. 10 individuals spoke to their family members, and they allowed us to place what looks like a bit of a nanny cam in the actual house where they were staying. So all of a sudden, we're no longer relying on somebody to tell us about how they're using social media. What we can do is we can use an app which we put on their phone, a mobile Ethno app, and we can record the activity, and we can start to look at two different sources of data. We can look at the physical camera-based evidence, and we can match this to the activity which they were doing. So then later on, when we go to speak to them, we actually have a little bit of an understanding. It was almost like we were there, invisible in the background with them. Just so you know, if you ever want to do this type of research yourself, one of the problems that you find is that towards the end of the study, they think you're there all the time. So they actually try to talk to you whilst you're not there, which is a bit crazy. You have to get a quick alert that someone's actually trying to reach out. This is a guy who was showing us a news article that he was looking up. So to switch markets, to switch sort of ideas, one area that we wanted to do was we went down to Australia, and again, we were very keen to find out why people were using Twitter within this market in particular. And because we have to do different research in different ways in different markets, we actually we sent a camera crew and an interviewer, and they lived with people for a period of 2 days, which doesn't sound that harsh, but imagine when you wake up in the morning, there's someone in their lounge and they're kind of following you around, and then we were able to do some short synopsis films.
And in my household, I've got my mum, my dad, and my dog, Charlie. I started using Twitter because I noticed that a bunch of YouTube personalities that I followed were also using Twitter as a way of keeping up with things. And so I decided that it would be good for me to be able to keep up with that and to see what they were seeing for the things that they were following. So I created a Twitter account, and I went through a Twitter quiz that recommended here's some people that you should follow, and based on your interests. And so I went through that quiz and added the people that I found would actually be useful from that quiz. I like Twitter because it has nice bite-sized small bits of information that I can skim through and go through a lot quicker in comparison to things like Facebook, where I'm a lot more invested in what I'm reading. One of the main ways I use Twitter is to get updates on YouTube videos as they come out from personalities that I like to watch. One example is Achievement Hunter, who did a video on a game called Rocket League. So after seeing the video of this game, I immediately went home and bought it and showed it to all my friends, and I said, you guys need to get this is amazing. And so they then all bought the game and we played together. I played it profusely, and I also got into playing tournaments in Australia, which I really enjoyed and made money off of. Another way I use Twitter is to keep up to date with game updates as they happen for games such as Rocket League. Recently, I think about 2 weeks ago, there was a game update that added 2 new tiles that you could play with. So I saw that, I went onto the Steam marketplace and I bought those, and now I use them. One of the main Twitter accounts that I follow is IGN. They post daily reviews and articles about what's going on.
Very sad-looking dog that probably doesn't get taken for a walk anymore, because when we went down and so gaming is a huge community for us, and when we went down and spoke to these guys, what was really consistent across all the different markets was that, amazingly, if you get people onto the subject of social media and you ask them like what they've done, or you're able to sort of be a fly on the wall and see how they've used the different platforms, we really start to see a very sort of consistent story. And what we saw sort of 2 groups of social platforms really starting to emerge. The first group was a very sort of conscious and active group, and the second group was a very sort of subconscious and passive group. Neither group, I would basically say to you right now, to sort of take my sort of Twitter hat off, there's the pros and cons of each one. In the subconscious group is where we see the huge amounts of time spent. This is micro moments on the bus. Previously we were just sort of, as I mentioned, we were just sort of idling, waiting for time. Now we can pick something up and we can go through and we can look for an update, we can look for a new post, we can do all this type of activity. What we actually saw when we asked people about Twitter, and again the example of our young gamer in Australia, is he has a very distinctive role as to what he's doing. He's using it to find out the latest information on games that he either plays, or he's following YouTube personalities on Twitter, which is even like how interconnected everything's getting. He's out there and he's following these people to find out exactly the information that he's interested in. So he's very leaned in and he's very conscious and active. And this again is a key consistency that we've seen across all of the markets so far. To give you this is a terrible chart to try and present, so bear with me. But to give you an idea, in a market like India, what we start seeing, we use a different range of statistical modelling. The way to think about this is if all of the key attributes were like positive magnets, the stronger the positive magnet, the more they want to separate from each other. And then what we can do is we can overlay the individual platforms and we can start to see which platforms start to connect to the different attributes, let's say. So for example, what we see is we see a different platform was all about sharing photos. We also see, I kind of love this, that in India we ask people, Twitter unfortunately is not used for dating or pursuing romantic interests at all. A little bit sad about that. But it gives us an understanding as to what we actually really are there for. Again, to go back to our jobs to be done, we understand what's the sort of the mindset. So we saw a lot of consistencies between what people were telling us and then when we use a different range of online techniques, how we can start to see. So for example, within India, we know that the platform is there for people to see what's happening. We know that it's there for people to see like what they're really interested in sort of news or politics or global events. So it really has some sort of key benefits along those lines as well. So broadly, where do we see the social landscape today? We sort of split this, at Twitter we split this into 3 zones. First of all, there's the connection zone. So the connection zone is for staying in contact with friends and family. In essence, this is where social media was born. Social media was born from people trying to stay connected through university. We also see a certain range of just for entertainment. So I'm bored, I have something I need to do. And again, I think if we all think about our own social media consumption, these are the types of attitudes that most of us have. And then lastly, where we see Twitter is in down this moment of discovery. So we understand what it is that people are using this for. People are reaching out, they're opening the platform, they're trying to find out what's happening, or there's a particular event, good and bad. The data from the US elections has sort of shown how crazy high things can really get. But we also see some very sort of unique behaviours within Southeast Asia. The growth of K-pop on Twitter has been phenomenal. I actually understand BTS, EXO, you name them. I'm almost like a sort of a fan, even though I can't speak a word of Korean or understand what they're on about. I really understand where their fans bring their passion from. But we also see things, I'll tell you an interesting example. The data was flagging, so we have like a dashboard where we see all this data coming through. And there was recently a big UFC fight in the States, very well publicised. Where we see an Irish guy called Conor McGregor, and he was fighting a Russian guy called Khabib. Interesting thing about Khabib's a Muslim. Really, really interesting. What did we see when we looked at the data? We started to see Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, India, Singapore, Malaysia. Malaysia was the 3rd highest market to talk about that particular event. Our penetration in Malaysia is tiny. Much, much smaller than what we see in other markets. But it just kind of shows you that when there's something that people are interested in, we know why they're coming to us. We know why they're coming to us. They're coming to us to see what the public debate is, and they're looking to find out more information. So yeah, this has sort of been one of the key findings to our research. So how do we boil this down into some key mindsets? When we look at Twitter, we see 4 key moments. Number 1, there's this sort of in-the-moment satisfaction. Something's happening. US election's been announced, or even things like locally, like things like Malaysian election, or there might be a sort of an event, good news and bad news. Then there's a bit of a short-term benefit. I'm interested in a particular topic, I need to know more, so people are coming onto a platform to find out what's happening. And then what's really interesting, and I go back to the example of our young gamer within Australia, there's also 2 sort of more deep-rooted elements, where there's an element to feel part of something. So something's happening, we're coming up to the Indian elections next year. I think what we'll see is a lot of activism, a lot of people wanting to sort of show that they feel connected to something. So it's a good way to voice their opinion. And then lastly, actually people use it to sort of create their personality. We all have different sort of personality traits that we're looking to expand. When we ran this research in Indonesia, there was a lady who described herself as like the funny one of her group. And when you went through and you asked her about everything that she enjoys about Twitter, it was all to do with sort of her personality. So she was really using it to sort of expand, and she was sort of the person. I think we all know that person who forwards lots of things on to us, or she was that person. So this is how she was using it. She was creating her identity. So this is great. We've done some great work. We should pat ourselves on the back. We've been out there, we've spoken to all these people, we've got an understanding as to how social media landscape has sort of changed. But in essence, you know, we have to do something with this. So this is where we then speak to our marketing audience. We really see that there's a fourth dimension starting to emerge. Previously, it used to be all about the right message. The creative agency was almost the king of the show. It was all about getting the ad out there, getting the ad that people remember. This is what it was all driven about before. Then what we saw was media planning and buying became important. So all of a sudden we had right time and right place as being sort of the key founding members. Now, what we're starting to see is a development which is the right mindset. It's great that I speak to the right audience. It's great that I understand who they are. But how can I go one step further? How can I figure out, you know, how can I dig into the mindset that they're in when I'm looking to communicate to them? So, to show you the relevance of mindset, we're going to play a little game. Hands up. Don't see any hands down. Hands up if you watched TV or video online yesterday. Keep it up, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. Okay, keep it up if you can remember one advertisement from yesterday. We'll keep going. How about 3? I'm not going to pick on people to pick 3, but it's hard, correct? How much have you had to try and scour your brain to remember 3 ads that you saw yesterday? Think of how many ads you were exposed to. Do you know what? You win my first prize. Amazing, isn't it? Think about that. Think about how much money was spent just yesterday trying to get you to see a product, a service, try something new, visit a restaurant, here's an offer, here's a promo, here's a code, you name it. All that money was spent yesterday. A lot of it's got wasted. Only a very small amount was remembered. So this is where we then turn to neuroscience to try and help solve some of these riddles. If we can come up with some insights into what is creating the memories, what works, what doesn't work, then we can use this on our platform and we can help our clients to create better ads and actually solve some of those puzzles. So maybe they can get beyond 3. Why do we use neuroscience? Neuroscience takes out the human element. I asked everybody in the room if you could remember one ad. A few of you could remember one ad. Maybe that ad is the most relevant ad that you were looking at, or maybe you're in the mindset for car insurance. All of a sudden, you know, we've all done this. Our car insurance is running out. All of a sudden we feel like we see car insurance ads all the time. Those ads were already there. You just didn't realize they were there because the relevancy was missing. So what we use neuroscience for is to overcome some of those human barriers. So we work with a range of different companies. Trust me when I say taking this equipment to Saudi Arabia has its own challenges. It took a long time for us to get the permits to take this type of brain activity into that market. But once we get there, it's really great at allowing people to express the subconscious. What are we looking for? It really boils down to driving some sort of long-term memory gain. If we can take things like emotional intensity, we can combine it with relevance or a platform where we're looking for, that sort of then goes through to the memory. So if we all think about how we created those memories that we created where we had moments of relevancy and actually we had some sort of emotional engagement. It's strange how much of our childhood we can all remember, but the reason why we can remember elements of our childhood is because they had emotional intensity around those particular moments. And this is what marketers are really looking for. Marketers are looking for a hook or a key to get you to retain that information. If they can get you to retain that information, they don't have to speak to you as frequently. Think of how much money that would save them. So when we tested this on Twitter, what we were really looking for was we were looking to see if we could create a platform where the general browsing activity was sort of performing very well, but plus also that when we were using a new advertising format like video, that all of a sudden we weren't disrupting this. We want to make this. So we work a lot with our engineering team. They're sort of very proud of the products that they've created, but we wanted to make sure that we were creating products that were very seamless. You know, we've all got to that point where, you know, waiting for the seconds to tick down before you can skip an ad feels like an eternity, correct? So what we see when we look at this and we say, right, okay, so we're not going to be in the, we're not going to be in the intrusive world. We're going to find out what's happening. We can actually create a platform where we start to see an increased sort of level of emotional intensity. We also see some small uptakes in what's called global and detailed memory. This is the left and the right parts of your brain. When I say the left and right parts of your brain, anybody who's left-handed, it's the right and the left parts of your brain. You never do neuroscience with left-handed people because the brain is actually the other way around. So yeah, you have to exclude those. It's a bit sad. But anyway, just amongst right-handed people. This is great. So if I take you through the journey that we're going through, we've understood our role, we've understood the platform, we've understood a little bit about the marketplace, we've spoken to the right people. Again, how can we prove that there's a more effect? So what we wanted to do was we wanted to bring in some new and interesting techniques into actually this side of the curve as well. We run a product, some of us know it very well. What that product will tell us is we test a huge number of post campaigns. So we know that works, but we know it works from a sort of a percentage point of view. But how else can we test if this is truly working? What we wanted to do through this whole research project was kind of take the human aspect out of it. How can we remove the questionnaire? How can we remove, would you buy this? How can we take all of those elements out? This is then we've been starting to experiment with virtual reality. We had a bit of a brainstorm. A guy in the team, he said, we said, okay, how can we prove this? How can we stop this? You know, so we could follow them around, they buy something, yeah, that's okay for a can of Coke or, I always say tin of beans because I'm from the UK, but you know what I mean, like a small, an ice cream. You know, you can follow them around long enough and you'll find them buying products. Or you could get them to upload their shopping receipts. You know, these are all sort of standard methodologies. But they only really work for a very sort of short, small period of products. So we come up with an idea. We run this so far within India. What about if we create a virtual store? So what about if they still haven't got a clue that they're doing a research project for Twitter or they're doing a research project on advertising? What if we just made them play some games as they went all the way through? So then what we do is we took these respondents. We were using neuroscience, we found out how they were using social media, we've explored them as people, so we know a hell of a lot about them. But we wanted to sort of answer this last challenge. So it's a short clip as to how we did this in India. Maybe. to say, it's very interesting. These respondents, I think when people do research, they come to a lab or we're running a lot of this at universities, I think they fully expect, some sort of quiz or when we took people through these different stages, when we asked them to just wear some equipment, one thing I love to do is I love to do like hidden methodologies. So we asked them just to sit down, we put the equipment on them and we said, once it calibrates, feel free to take out your phone, do what you normally do if you had a moment of time. So actually in that moment of time, everybody takes out their mobile phone. Everybody starts to scan through, they start to look. So this is almost like we start recording from this moment forwards. So we get a lot of, when we talk about articulated moments, we get a lot of type of data from that point as well. Then we took them through, they then played a few different games. We sort of drove them around a Mumbai grocery store. We were able to take them into a mobile phone store that we built, that we modelled on a Mumbai store. Quite interesting, somebody turned around to us and said, if you've ever been to a mobile phone store in Mumbai, there's at least 25 people in there, so you should put some more people in the room with them. That's a learning for next time. So what we were able to do was we were able to sort of map and we start to look at behaviours. So this is the data when we see they stumble across the ad for, in this case it's a Samsung Galaxy Note. We can see if they're actually registering any interest within this ad. What we're looking for here is a level of cognitive load. So this is a slightly different methodology to what we've been using in Australia, but it works very well. We start to see them sort of processing the ad. We start to see if there's enjoyment within it. And we can actually work out that this is an ad that people really did enjoy. What happened when they went into the store and the same Samsung product was available within store? There's a small increase in desire to purchase. We asked them, the following handsets, which one, would you be most interested in? The Samsung one registered a 4% advantage over the other handsets. But again, we know that the mobile phone industry is a very competitive landscape. But what was also interesting was that it actually took a third less time for them to come up with that decision. When we take this data to Samsung, they find this absolutely mind-blowing, because we're taking their ad and we've tested their ad all the way through the metrics. So we understand that when they're on the platform, people are leaned in, we know they're consuming this, so we're actually starting to see some sort of real life effect. Of course, this is one particular study done within a lab. It's very hard to scale this type of research, but really, we're not looking for to run this thousands of times to get this type of data. We're really trying to see what we can learn and create a hypothesis more for the future. So, where we sort of got to? Well, interestingly, I think we've found out what's our job to be done. And our job to be done is to really provide a platform to help people understand what people are thinking about, what people are talking about, but plus also to stay up to date with what matters most to them. And secondly, I think our big sort of learning so far is the fact that Twitter is sort of used in this discovery mindset. And what's great about that is we've seen that there's a creation of memories, which obviously has a key commercial benefit. We also, the best thing about speaking to people is that you really find out why they've come to the product. And I've got one more section after this, but I really like to sort of focus on this. In some parts of the world, there is not freedom of press. Some parts of the world, you can go to prison for stating something against a monarchy. On Twitter, we are very, very keen that we are going to remain a platform for free speech. We have rules. If you break one of those rules, I don't know if anybody here has ever reported a tweet, very easy to do so. You click on the tweet, I find this tweet offensive, and that goes off, and actually that'll go through an algorithm, and somebody eventually will review that and see if it was something that we should remove. But, like I say, for an audience like women who live in Saudi Arabia, Twitter's actually become an opportunity for them to see what's happening in a very sort of unfiltered way. So this was really powerful when we actually spoke to this lady. Okay, last, it's very much fun. Right, If anybody can tell me what this is, you can have 2 sunglasses and a pen. Right. But we'll come back to it later. I also thought it'd be kind of good to give you guys a few thoughts when you're thinking about research. Research is something, data, analytics, everything comes up all across our lives these days. So what I thought I'd do is I thought I'd just share with you as a final few comments and some few key learnings. Right. If anybody gets this right, I'll come back and give you like a really flashy prize. But for just trying to answer this, can anybody tell me what these guys, the Romans, have to do with space exploration? What's the common link? And why did these guys have a huge impact on space exploration? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Most random guess? Go for it.
Colonization.
Close? Oh, I'm sorry, they don't fly so well. I'll tell you. When NASA came to design the space shuttle, they want to transport the rockets from here to here. When they put those rockets, they have to put those rockets on a train. That train is a certain width, because there has to be 2 trains going either side. That width is designated by the width of the train track. That train track is by the people that built the trains. Those trains are built on roads. Those roads came from the UK. The UK, all the roads were built by the Romans. The Romans built the roads, so one cart could go that way and one cart could come this way. No wider. Why? Because it's inefficient to build a road wider than 2 carts, because this is the optimum time. What this talks about is what we call path dependency. So if you don't, every time you've got a new question, every time you've got a new research project, you should really think about, how have I got here? Am I going to do things in the same way that we always did them before? Am I going to do things in a new sense? Stop asking the same questions. Stop going and speaking to the same people. Go and speak to a different group of people. Go and speak to the actual audience and find out what's happening. So path dependence, remember? Rockets and Romans, very easy. This one, oh come on, this is an easy one. Who knows what this is? Close. Okay, where does it go from and to?
London to Paris.
London to Paris, who said that first? There we go. First sunglasses for you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. The next thing I would say is, when you're coming upon a new research project, always ask the right questions. And stop thinking about the environment in which you're operating. These guys spent, I think, 30 billion in the end. Eurostar opened, amazing. All of a sudden, I took this, everybody took this in London, trust me. We can go to Paris by train. Wow, this is absolutely amazing. Previously, we had to go and take the ferry was awful, or we could go by aeroplane, but that seemed to be, for really sort of extravagant people who takes an aeroplane, it's only 45 minutes, it's even closer than here to KL. So Eurostar, we dug the tunnel, the French dug one half, the Brits dug the other half, we met in the middle, they made the train. Everybody was excited, everybody took the train. It had a first class and an economy section, it was amazing, everybody was on this. All of a sudden, the airline started to fight back. They made check-in more efficient, like you could do digital app check-in, all of these types of things. And the biggest loser was these guys. They started to see passenger numbers fall. Where are they going? They're going to the airlines. What do the airlines do? Well, the airlines have increased their service, they get there quicker. How do we get there quicker? What's the problem? Oh, the problem is it's always the Brits that let it down. The problem was all the rail track within the UK side. It just couldn't take the high-speed trains that they had in France. France has had a very sort of long tradition of high-speed trains. It's about a fortune upgrading the track on the British side. Great, we've done this. 15 minutes it took off. We're now 15 minutes faster from London to Paris. We're faster than the aeroplane. However, think about it, when they actually went and asked the people, they asked the right questions. By the time they'd finished all of this, people now wanted Wi-Fi on board. People wanted seamless check-in. Actually, there's someone that told me about this. They said, you could have taken all that money, you could have given out free champagne to all of the economy class people for 25 years. You know, like, imagine you got a free glass of champagne in economy. 15 minutes now all of a sudden doesn't sound like too much. So making sure you understand the problem and do not focus too much on what you think is affecting you. Okay. Might be an easier one. Who's this?
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady. I would listen to this. You know the pen to go big. Okay. There's a Tom Brady effect when it comes to data. We all live in this world. There's so much data available. What Tom Brady teaches us, he teaches us to go and speak to the people as well as asking the questions. Tom Brady was 199th pick in the draft that year. He's almost in the bottom rung. He's like maybe going to get picked up, maybe not. Yet he's gone on to be the best player of American football they've ever seen. Why? Because the way in which they were doing things, all of the process was about looking at the same data and statistics. That data and statistics had never been proven wrong before. It created like O.J. Simpson. You know, it created multi-million-dollar stars. But all of a sudden, by going and asking the right questions, you could have found out a lot more information. Nobody went and spoke to him and found out that he was actually, you know, he had some fundamental flaws. He doesn't move that well, but he actually managed to overcome. So just by looking at the numbers is not good enough. You've got to go and speak to people. And lastly, anybody know who this is?
Tom Ford.
Tom Ford. Oh, I said Tom Ford. No way. These are not Tom Ford sunglasses, but there you go. Tom Ford. I've kind of ignored this a little bit today because you guys are all here and you had lunch, so you know you've got a reason to stay here a little bit longer. But Tom Ford used to be the head designer for Gucci, Yves Saint Laurent, all these types of activities. Tom Ford can teach everybody that works within research and data a valuable, valuable lesson. You go to a fashion show, every single fashion show, every single brand only has 15 minutes of catwalk time. 15 minutes. And 1 minute of that is getting everybody ready, everybody to sit down. So in essence, he's only got 13 minutes. He has got to create billions of dollars of fashion sales based off 13 minutes worth of delivery. 1 minute at the end, he walks out. You've all seen this type of footage. If not, go and look online. You always see the designer walk out and there's people kind of clapping and things like this. They actually know by that immediate feedback loop how well their sales are going to go. So think like Tom Ford. So yeah, like I say, 4 key things I'd like to leave you with. So hopefully you found the discovery work interesting, but also I like to take these 4 things away and think about them as we go forwards. Number 1, like I say, think about the Romans and rockets. Experimentation is completely key. Make sure if there's a path that you guys have been led down, do things differently, speak to different people. Second, don't be like the Eurostar and spend loads of money when you don't need to, or spend it in the wrong areas. Ask the right questions and you find out the right answers. I love the phrase, it's not my phrase, that data is only people in disguise. So if you're just looking at the data, go and meet the people as well. Go and find out what exactly is it that these people are motivated by. We actually, to make things more statistically relevant, we went off and did lots of quantitative studies based when we found out everything about our audience and the mindsets. But actually, if we'd gone out and spoken to the people and not done any of the quantitative research afterwards, we'd have just been as educated. But I think we always find a bit of security in some quantitative data as well, some percentages. And then lastly, you know, does your data pass the memorability test? One key lesson that we've learned just by looking at the platform is that it's very hard to create memories. It's extremely hard. That's why we take notes, that's why we review things later. But what if we didn't have that capability? How can you take something and how can you make people remember? And in other words, can you present a little bit like Tom Ford? And that's it. Thank you. Shall I tell you the circles riddle? So the circles is how you get this. So the bird is actually designed around a series of different circles. And the circles are to represent all of the different conversations uniting and crossing over and different conversations branching out. So yeah, when we're developing Larry, who's the bird, it's all based off an intricate circle design.
Why is it called Larry?
Do you know what? It started off, there's a Larry is a type of bird from the US. Yeah, it's a bird native to California. It's something within the region. All of our rooms are based around bird themes. I found out Garuda's not an airplane, it's a bird as well. Excellent.
Let's have our Q&A sessions.
Yeah, what questions would you like to ask? Come on, each question gets a prize. Yes, sir.
Do you have any data analytics work based in Singapore, or any of the research that you're doing that's based in Singapore where our students can do an internship?
Yeah, completely. We were discussing this earlier on. We actually have an intern program. We thoroughly advise people to come along and ask. We will link up afterwards and we'll explain this in a little bit more detail. One thing I can promise you is if you pass the security test to come and work for us, which is actually quite steep, it's a very exciting place to be right now. We're seeing my regions, which is Middle East, North Africa, Asia Pacific, is where all of the growth for our platform is coming from at the moment. And we see our revenue growth is on the long side of that as well. So you see a very California-based business, so we have that sort of a very avant-garde leadership styles, but you also get to experience something that's really happening within the region right now as well. So yeah, I really agree. Yes, go ahead.
So some of my research has to do with, to some extent, how people are skeptical of certain types of tweets on Twitter.
Yes.
And so I was wondering, you talked about memorability, which is sort of the opposite of that, where they're sort of buying into it and then remembering it.
Yes.
Have you guys done any sort of neuroscience type research on the flip side, when they see something and they sort of immediately say, like, I don't like that?
100%. A certain, how can I say that sounded better? A certain four-wheel drive car manufacturer, you'll guess which one that is, I suppose, created, they read the rule book, right? So they said, okay, people on social media, they're on there for a short period of time, so I need my ad to be catchy, I need it to get my brand in there, make sure I get the brand in there, and all this type of stuff. They went off, they went to a very luxurious location, and they shot an ad that was very dark, very, very artistic, I would say, in its approach. And when we ran that through all of the neuroscience studies, even amongst people who owned that actual brand, again, very small group, but people who owned that brand, none of them engaged with it. The reason why none of them engaged with it is because it didn't appeal to any of the human senses that we have. There was no intrigue, there was no human beings within there. The best way to describe it is, do you ever feel like if somebody's walking up from behind you, you know that person's there? Because we actually can identify human faces very, very quickly. So taking a human out of the ad was actually destroying the number of people that would stop in the ad. So when people went through that particular promoted tweet, people skipped very quickly. When we come through to text-based tweets, it has to be a very strong, how can I put it? There has to be one or two very emotive words within that. I don't know if you've noticed this, you'll all try this later. Try and look at some words and not read them. Try and be like a child that can't read. It's very hard, because once we've learned to read, the ability to read goes into the fast thinking part of our brain, and we look at a word and we read it, and we don't even want to read it, we do read it, we read it very fast. So what we actually see is almost in a way, the communication or the tweets that go against that human nature are the ones which just drift off. They just go, and it's this fast. You're trying to stop a thumb or a finger. Some people scroll with a finger, which is really bizarre, we can't figure out why, but some people still use a finger, some people use the thumb. But yeah, great question. I would say, think about what intrigues us. Bright colours is another one. How crazy. We argued this with the research agency. They said all the ads that had bright colours were much more successful than all the ads that didn't have bright colours. I said, oh, that's a bit crazy, it's simple. I can't go up there and say like, oh, just put bright colours in your ad. And they said, but you notice stop signs and they're red and white. And they're red and white for a reason, because there's no natural red and white within the environment. So you notice something that, if they were green and grey, you wouldn't notice it because you'd think it would blend into the background. So yeah, there's some reasons for why. Good.
As you know, because digital media has been expanding in the past decade, right? And of course, traditional media, however, it's still somewhat relevant, right? So my question is, how does Twitter try and complement themselves with TV, and what exactly is your USP in doing so?
Yeah, I mean, great question. We often get, often people want to know, how do we complement TV, how do we sort of fund against TV? If I go back to what the research we were doing within India, we had this hypothesis that because we see a lot of conversation around television-based events, that we were the ultimate complementary force. Okay. We did the time stamping, and it was relatively within the same time zone. But then what was really interesting is there's a huge hierarchy. The more engaging television content, there was actually two things that were really interesting. There was an India-Australia cricket match, and there was a stampede in Mumbai. When those two pieces of content, we could monitor the activity. When those two pieces of content were being broadcast, nobody was even looking at their phone. So the engagement with the screen was high. One for a very sort of shocking effect, and one was a very sort of exciting leaned-in opportunity. I think where social media, in general, where social media and television are starting to converge, is in those moments of boredom, maybe where the plot is not moving on, maybe we're not so emotionally attached to the product. In India is a good example. We see Twitter as much more replacing things like traditional newspaper reading than we see it ever to replace television viewing. Television viewing is still there. It's just becoming lighter and lighter, and the devices are becoming more different. But the relationship between the two, I actually feel has been very overstated in the past. That you're screen stacking or you're dual screening and things like this. And a lot of that's because a number of times people will say, my kids don't watch television anymore, they're just on their phones all the time. But that's a sample of two. Any research will tell us that's not relevant enough. It will give you an insight to find out why, but that's not everything that's happening. So we see there's a lot of things that we can learn. I think people have tried to put live content onto things like Facebook. Some of it's worked, some of it hasn't worked. So again, I still think there's a strong relationship, but it's not as overlapping as I think people really think.
And interesting you mentioned the case in India of those incidents happening, right? And I can see it in my life, because when these things happen, they crowd around the television. Immediately there's this sharing and connection that you get that's different from social media when you look at an incident that happened, and the sharing, the way the communication happens is also very different. So it's I think you can never replace that. Unfortunately, we see like in markets like Japan where people do live very into the life, they live on their own. We do see that's one of the leading markets for Twitter in the world is Japan. They can have multiple conversations with people around different passion points. And that's a market where I think television is still not caught up with the society. There's the people who are out there, they're streaming different content. But yeah, it's still a moment of conversation. You can see those big moments in television. You can see the peaks. Game of Thrones opening, everybody's talking about it, and it goes a little bit quiet, and you can see there's a big conversation just after the event. So there's lots of those things, but I still think nobody has actually ascertained, nobody's gone down into that level of detail. I think a lot of the reports at the moment are just very top-line people throwing things out there. Go.
Thank you, Martyn, for the presentation. On side note, I used to work in TV, so I understand what you're talking about. But my question is regarding what you just said about Twitter replacing newspaper reading.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of traditional newspapers advertising on your platform.
Yeah.
My sense is it doesn't work. Can you say why it doesn't and how they could make it work? And also, exactly how much are they getting in return? Because I don't think they're getting much in return for what they're advertising.
Yeah, I think it's a tough business. I used to be in the newspaper business myself. It's a tough business to be in. Which and I were discussing this before. You have journalists out there that study to be journalists. You know, they study to go off and they study to create really great investigative reporting. The trouble is we live in a society where that investigative reporting doesn't have as much weight as it used to. So what you see from newspapers is they've really started to kind of evolve. You know, they want to sort of they want to keep their audience and they want to keep things captive. When I say we're starting to see a replacement of news within India, I think there's two things. Number one, and we'll see this a little bit more as we run up to the election in the forthcoming year, people see there's a good and bad about social media. There's a very distrust to some of the things that are on there, but thankfully, in India at the moment, we seem to be more in the trusted camp than the distrusted camp. We've been very public about removing fake followers, you know, we've been all of that type of business. I think what we start to see is the way in which a newspaper can use a platform like Twitter is to take that best content and really promote that to the top. However, what we also see is them promoting what we would describe as more clickbait content and putting that on there as well. So I think, unfortunately, because I think as a society we're seeing less value in sort of true journalism, they're really struggling to keep that. So yeah, like I take your point that it works and it doesn't work. I think the side of it that works is where we can create an audience for them. We can take their headline and then again, once they've gone through Twitter, we're quite happy to be a gateway to a great piece of content. What I think sometimes drives us a bit crazy is that we're a gateway to a very sort of average experience that, you know, I mean, like I say, the Daily Mail was one of the most followed accounts that we have, and it's just about, you know, anything that happens with the royal family, it's constant news. But we see that people have a desire to have a conversation about that.
Should there be a paywall? Because that's their way of making money. Is it you using your platform to link and then you want to watch my content? Does it work?
I think it's really unfortunate because I think, again, you know, I used to work for News Corporation and we introduced paywalls. We said that this is the boundaries, and within that, I think what is slightly concerning is the fact that the appetite for people to pay for things these days has become less and less. I think people expect things to be free. They're almost in a way like, even like the introduction of ad blockers. So you're receiving premium content and then you're not expecting to pay for it as well. Will it get to a tipping point? I think there'll certainly be some movements, there'll be some incidences that happen that really address how we think as consumers. I think you'll start to see, like with the American elections and things like this, you'll start to see moments where people start to question whether or not they're looking at is the truth or if this can be trusted. And that's a really poor place to be. Yes.
What's the strategy to monetize from Chinese market when Twitter is prohibited in China?
Yeah. Great question. I don't think we're ever going to be allowed in China. I think our core belief is freedom of speech. We're a freedom of speech platform. We have a rule book. If you're inciting violence or hate speech or anything like that, then we will remove that activity. And we have very strong algorithms to find that activity. And plus, also, it's a citizen platform as well. So if you don't like a tweet that I said, you can report myself, and like I mentioned before, we can get that checked. I think the way in which we've driven a very sort of strong commercial growth from China is because they see us as a good platform to go and learn about the world as well. I'll give you a good example. Chinese handset providers, the Huawei's, the Xiaomi's, the Vivo, Oppo's, OnePlus, Honor, what other ones do we work with? Techno, and all of these brands, they're very keen to learn something about the world. So what we often do is we often run seminars with them where we're able to show them what is happening perhaps with their brand. We're actually able to give them some additional sort of valuable information. By giving them that valuable information, we can often work with them at a very strategic level to see how we can grow their audience further. I'll give you a good example. Anybody heard of Techno Mobile? See, right? Okay. If this was in Nigeria right now, you would all put your hands up. Techno is a Chinese brand. They were looking for a new market to grow. They came to Twitter. We took them around the different markets. They came to us and they said, "We were interested to find out conversations around mobile phone sets." We're like, "This is easy. We do this all the time." And then this gentleman turned around and said, "In Nigeria." We're like, "Okay, it might be a little pushing it, but we'll go off and we'll find out." The conversation around Chinese handsets in Nigeria at that time was they were cheap. There was reasons why they were cheap. They didn't work. They didn't have long battery life. Apps didn't download. It was really pretty negative. And they wanted to launch their brand into that environment. But what was interesting was, by understanding the context in which they were launching, it helped them to almost in a way create a handset or choose the handset brands that they think is going to work. So again, what we were able to do is we were able to take a company from, I think it's Shenzhen, take them from Shenzhen, and they can almost in a way they can have a business within a completely remote country around the world. But what we can do is we can almost in a way take that country and we can bring it into the boardroom in Shenzhen. We have the same with the m-commerce brands. A lot of the m-commerce brands, I don't know, brands of Shein and Jolly Chic and Zaful and all these types of brands, they're very strong in Saudi Arabia. They look Arabic, speak Arabic, sound Arabic, payment is in local currency, yet they're completely run from China. But again, what they're using Twitter for is not only do we have a valuable audience they want to reach out to, but we're able to provide them with that extra value of context as to what's happening. Of course, people don't go onto our platform and start speaking about, like, "Oh, I hate this shopping app," or "I like this one." You're never going to find that type of information. If you do, it's very, you might find it on iPhone, but you're not going to find it on a particular shopping app. Well, like I say, what it is it sort of works in a very sort of nice sort of two-way path, as it were. We're able to provide what's happening within that marketplace, the conversation, the type of people, provide a bit of insight, and then we can give that back to them to help them strategically develop. So yeah, that's how I think we've been pretty successful so far.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Is there any other question? No?
Sure, can I ask a little bit about WhatsApp as well? Because as you know, it's that media space which not a lot of social media has gone into, and it's hard to capture the conversations there, even though it's ultimately extremely important, right? So there is, I think some people who already know that Facebook is allowing businesses to use WhatsApp to collect data, such that commercial companies can approach these users. Is Twitter going down that same route?
I think almost amazingly no. We collect. The algorithms that we build collect really interesting deep dive data. I think what I like about the company which I work for is that we know where to draw the line. Like, in essence, if we're providing, if we're siphoning off groups of people based on something which they're looking to do, eventually there'll be mistrust between those people and that platform. Actually, if you go online and you actually start to search and you say, like, I can't believe, like, I was having this conversation with my friend and all of a sudden I'm receiving ads for that particular brand. That's something that's happens to more people more often. That's a very short shelf life. After a while, you're then going to start to, you're going to start to erode your audience. It sounds crazy to say. I wish, if you guys ever get an opportunity to, Jack Dorsey is coming to India soon. His rhetoric when he starts is, it's the consumer first. If the consumer distrusts you, you're fired. We can all delete an app within the next 3 seconds. Take out the phone, hover over it, gone, bing, done. Distrust, never going to come back. So I think those types of solutions are great, and there's a lot of advertisers that will see through that as well. There's a lot of advertisers that perhaps won't sort of be too bothered by that level of data. But yeah, as a company, it's all about the consumer experience first. That's why we invest so much money into our ad product, trying to seem seamless. We don't want to disrupt, because if people come on board and they find the ad experience, they know the ad experience is essential for them to have the product for free. But if we find that process to be too disruptive, then they'll just siphon out, and we won't even be able to speak to them anymore. And the whole company is not built on that kind of, it's what pays the bills, but it's not what funded the company in the first place. Cool. Yes.
Can I ask a follow-up to my last question?
Yeah, of course.
So thinking not just about, say, just one individual tweet, but if you think about, say, the path dependence in terms of the series of tweets from a company to consumers, do you notice that, say, if they have one tweet that doesn't resonate very well, does that affect the performance of their tweets in the long run, or is it behave a bit more independently within the specific platform Twitter?
Yeah, I kind of find a lot of things somebody thought would be very clever and amazing, they either get picked up in a very sarcastic way. I'll tell you a good example, you can go look at this afterwards. Go and check out Elon Musk talking about the fact that he lost a lot of followers, but it's actually still great that he's still followers. He has literally sparked off like a range of like stand-up comedians to comment after this, who just basically took what he said and rephrased it using different words from the dictionary. So sometimes you get elements like that. A lot of times I think people think that it's a very one-way platform. They don't understand it's a two-way experience. But actually I think the people that truly understand what it's all about, everybody talks about Wendy's, but there was a really good example. There's a really good example with Lidl. So you know Lidl, it's a German discount store. Yeah. So Lidl, this guy tweets Lidl and he says, 3 months ago my mum bought 72 jars of peanut butter from your store. They were all on offer. Where I'm down to my last. I numbered every jar and I'm on number 72. Can we get the offer back so my mum can buy more peanut butter? Now, the great thing about Lidl as a company is they give a range of different people the freedom to have a conversation with a consumer, a one-on-one based conversation. It doesn't have to go through corporate. It doesn't, like, this is how it would be killed. Because, you know, if you had to then have a meeting to discuss, you know, should we respond to that person, yes or no, you know, like, that's gone. That moment is completely gone. The person who actually runs that, there's about 15 people that contribute to that handle. They wrote back and they said, really interesting, why don't you try and get 72 retweets, one for every jar, you get 72 retweets, and we'll give your mum the same discount. It starts to get picked up and all these people start to expand. The guy that tweets, you should go and look for this, is a very colourful character. He only wears tie-dye, like top-down trousers, and he's got bright red hair. And all of a sudden it starts to expand. And they said, okay, well, this is getting serious. So this is a brand having a conversation with an individual within, you know, anywhere within the US. And what you see was really interesting was a lot of people jump onto that conversation in more of a skeptical way, and they start to say, oh, hold on, you shouldn't just eat peanut butter. You know, it's crazy, it's really unhealthy for you. Like, you know, who's giving this kid this diet? And then they go to the mum. The mum then responds and just says, my son's autistic. He can't take textured food. This is the best thing for him. We've spoken to his paediatric doctor. He's been on this diet for the last 2 or 3 years. Just let it go. Load more support comes through. All of a sudden the conversation starts to build. Lidl then turn around and say, you know, a lifetime supply now if you get to a certain level. So what they're doing is they're just being they're understanding what the platform is all about. We have done this presentation to Lidl. Lidl understand that people are coming on to they want to see conversations of good health, they want to understand what's happening, they want to be able to utilise this. The more brands that we can get to act that way, the better I think the whole experience for advertisers will be. And I think that's how commercial, think about all the earned value that you get from that. The one example everybody talks about is Nike. The Colin Kaepernick Just Do It campaign. Anybody know what the estimated market value was of that campaign in terms of earned media value? $6 billion US. If they wanted to buy that level of global coverage, it would have cost them $6 billion US. But what do? They ran an ad, they put it on social media, they stuck up a billboard. The actual net cost, I think it was like less than 1% of that $6 billion. So yeah, I think if you use social media in the right way, and it's part of your company, and you understand how the platforms integrate with each other, then yeah, there's definitely commercial success to be had. I get most frustrated with the social media manager that turns around and says, I worked on Facebook but it didn't work on you. I worked on you and it didn't work on YouTube. Or, like, isn't it all 6-second ads these days? Am I just going to make a 6-second ad with the brand at the front? That's what you said, yeah? That's what I'm going to take away. So yeah, there's key lessons to be had, I think, definitely, as to how you integrate this.
Is there any last questions? Not, then shall we close? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thank you so much, Martyn, for giving us such an interactive and engaging discussions. Very fun.